Hello again, guys. One thing I have noticed when I'm in the Philippines, especially towards the end of a trip, or at least a few weeks into it, is I'm a lot more patient and a lot more accepting of circumstances, and I don't get as impatient about things. And one example of that, I was in the supermarket in the SM in Baguio City, and it was a good hour and a half in the line. There were a lot of people, or there weren't that many people, but they had a lot of items because there were people buying a lot of small items for their sari stores, their little shops. So it was taking a long time to scan all those items, and I was chatting to the lady in front, and she was totally unfazed by the waiting. It was all part of the experience, and again, nobody was showing any impatience. And I just thought to myself, maybe the first time I got a bit impatient, I looked around and I thought, look, there's no point being impatient. You're not going to get anywhere, you're not going to win any friends. So back home in Australia, people would be getting impatient, complaining a bit. Australian maybe aren't as bad as they could be, but it's a different situation. And when I got home, I remember a guy in his garden had a problem in his garden. He was sort of digging up some soil to put in some plants, and it wasn't really working. I don't know if the soil was a bit hard or whatever, but he was starting to get impatient and swearing and stuff, and I just sort of thought, that was soon after I got back. I just thought, gee, why are you getting so worked up about that? And of course, the longer I'm back myself, I'll sort of fall back into that pattern of being more impatient, or not as accepting maybe, but it's one of the great things about being in the Philippines for more than a few weeks, is that you will fall into their way of life. It's much slower and much more patient and much more accepting. And another example, when I was waiting in Manila harbour for the ferry it was going to Davao, it was a 12-hour wait, and people were waiting in this big terminal with a high roof. It did have fans in the ceiling, but they weren't very effective. It was pretty hot. It was crowded. There were people waiting with lots of stuff. There was a dog in a cage, well, probably more than several pets, probably. Extended families with young children. And the limit for the ferry, I think, is about 150 kilos a person. So there were people with huge amounts of stuff just waiting and waiting and waiting. And eventually, after the 12 hours, there was an announcement that due to technical reasons, the ferry wouldn't be running today. And that was it. There's nothing else. So people just got up and they had their plan, I suppose. Maybe it had happened before, or they had a plan B, or they just going to go back to where they were. They might have been moving back to the provinces, or certainly some of them were, with the amount of stuff they had. There were business people who had goods that they were going to sell in the provinces that they got in Manila. But there wasn't any umming and ahhing. There weren't people throwing tantrums. There weren't people becoming aggressive and rude and impatient. It was all accepted. People weren't overly happy about it, but they didn't show it very much. I sort of looked at that, and I thought, even myself, even if I'd been in Australia and I'd been waiting for a plane that was delayed by an hour, people would be starting to always going up to the desk and asking what's going on and why is it running late and whatnot. But a different situation, and you do feed on what's going on around you, and it has for me that's a very positive aspect about being in the Philippines. You actually don't get as impatient. It's probably better for your health, and wherever you are, you're going to feed on the environment around you. But that's one of the great things about being in the Philippines for a month or two. Okay, thank you.